Hi everybody, welcome to this webinar, which is the first in our series called It's Time to Decarbonise. Today's webinar will be on how the latest independent energy advice can benefit your organisation, your customers, and help to meet net zero targets. So my name is Jess. I work for Energy Saving Trust and I'll be facilitating the webinar along with my colleagues Lucy and Laura, who you will meet in a bit. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. The webinar will be recorded and we have a British Sign Language interpreter with us today. Her name is Nicole, so hi Nicole. So they'll be on screen through the entire session. So you'll also notice that your microphones and your videos are off. However, there is the ability to ask questions using the question box that you'll find on the side of your screen. And at the end of the webinar, we'll answer your questions during the Q&A session. And also at the end of the session, prior to the Q&A section, there will be some polls put up on the screen and you can take a few minutes to answer those polls. We'll give you a chance to respond to those polls. They'll just appear on the screen, and just to note that your response to the poll will remain anonymous during the webinar, so nobody can see your response and your answers. So as I said, this is the first webinar and we'll be talking about how the latest independent energy advice can benefit your organisation and your customers and how it can help meet net zero targets. We'll first of all set the scene by explaining a bit about what we do here at Energy Saving Trust, and then we'll break down the key themes and key terms relating to sustainability and net zero. We'll then give some examples of how your organisation can decarbonise and address the climate emergency, and how to share this advice with your clients or your customers if you have them. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Lucy and Laura and they'll take you through the rest of the webinar.
Hi everyone, thank you Jess. My name is Lucy. I work at Energy Saving Trust and I'm a training and content developer. So I'm going to start us off by talking you through the context of who we are and why we're here, before going into some of the more detail about decarbonisation and net zero. So Energy Saving Trust is an independent organisation dedicated to promoting energy efficiency, low carbon transport and sustainable energy use. We aim to address the climate emergency and deliver the wider benefits of clean energy as we transition to net zero. We empower householders to make better choices, deliver transformative programmes for governments, and support businesses with strategy, research and assurance, enabling everyone to play their part in building a sustainable future. So on to the next slide, we've got some key terms that you may have come across in different formats. So businesses and environmentalists will use these terms like sustainability, climate change and net zero, and it's important that we have a common understanding of what these terms mean. So to set the context, here's a summary of each of these. So starting with sustainability, the meaning can change depending on the context. Our context is environmental sustainability, and you might have heard or seen the term sustainable defined as either meeting the needs of the present without compromising future generations' ability to meet their needs, or the long-term viability of a community, institution, or societal practice, or the capacity to maintain or improve the state and availability of desirable materials or conditions over the long term. Or you might have your own version. Ultimately, what all of these definitions are trying to capture is an idea of time and impact of the activity on the environment. For something to be sustainable, you still need to be able to do it, or something better than it at a future point, without adversely affecting other parts of life. Potentially one way to measure how sustainable something is just how long into the future you'll still be able to do that thing. So think about a practice in your life and whether it's sustainable. Perhaps it's buying groceries wrapped in single-use plastic. Plastics are made from oil, which is a finite resource. Eventually, oil will run out, so we won't be able to make single-use plastic anymore from that source. Recycling the plastic could help us extend how long we're able to do this practice. And using bioplastics, so that's plastics made from plant-based oils, could be another way to improve sustainability. Or maybe we buy groceries without any wrapping at all. Or perhaps think about a practice that's bigger than you, something that we do as a country or planet. Perhaps the way we farm or transport, manufacture products or create electricity. Is that practice sustainable? Moving on to climate change. So climate change refers to the long-term alteration of the Earth's average weather patterns, including temperature, wind, and precipitation. So that's rain or snowfall. While there's natural climate change, so that's climate cycles, that have and continue to occur throughout the Earth's history, human-induced climate change is directly linked to the amount of fossil fuels burned, aerosol released, and land alteration from things like agriculture and deforestation. According to the International Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, even at 1.5 degrees Celsius, significant changes in flood or drought risk are expected in many parts of Europe. The regions most prone to a rise in flood frequencies are Northern and Northeastern Europe, while Southern and Southeastern Europe show significant increases in drought frequencies. In the past, a 1 to 2 degree drop was all it took to plunge the Earth into what was called the Little Ice Age. Next, we have net zero. So this is a term that has gained significant attention in recent years, especially when it comes to tackling the urgent issue of climate change. At its core, net zero refers to achieving a balance between the amount of greenhouse gases we put into the atmosphere and the amount that we remove. To halt climate change, we have to consider net zero as a global issue. But the term net zero is also a term that an organisation or country might use to describe their strategy towards it. Indeed, the UK government has a strategy and target for net zero by 2050. Many companies, governments and organisations are setting net zero targets to align with international climate goals, reduce environmental impacts and create a sustainable future for all of us. In a world where we've achieved net zero, we will have homes that are comfortable and draft-free. The idea of a home where the temperature fluctuates constantly or with damp or condensation forming is an alien idea. Our homes are well insulated and ventilated. Our heating systems use low or carbon energy sources, low or zero carbon energy sources like heat pumps, and they're controlled efficiently. You may even share or own an electric vehicle or have an electric battery at home and use electrified public transport. And even having a battery to allow you to charge it overnight when a glut of wind power sees prices drop. And other sources might even be your own solar array, which provides free electricity. So this webinar series is called It's Time to Decarbonise. But what does decarbonisation actually mean? Decarbonisation is the process of reducing the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that enter the atmosphere. In other words, it's where you start on your journey of reaching net zero and reducing the impact of climate change. If we move on to the next slide, we'll talk about how your organisation can decarbonise and address the climate emergency. So measuring and reducing your emissions. Measure your contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, then work to reduce them in order to meet your targets. For example, adopt cleaner technologies, use renewable energy sources like solar and wind power, and improve energy efficiency. Set your own net zero targets. Setting them alone isn't enough though, just make sure that you work towards meeting them and then stick with them once you do. Adopt sustainable practices, for example, reducing food waste, recycling and waste management, and choosing products with lower carbon footprints. Involve and engage your staff. Educate them around sustainability, the climate emergency and net zero, engage them in activities, and provide them with resources to help you reach your goals. And finally, engage your customers. So how does this help you address the climate emergency? Well, it helps you get the message out to your customers. It helps you engage your customers and inspire or motivate them to make informed choices and changes. It also helps to show that you're serious about the climate emergency, which can boost your reputation and help you engage with more customers, increasing your impact. One way to do this is to have one or more sustainability champions. These are internal staff that help push this agenda with their colleagues and are people that other staff can ask questions to or provide ideas to. Depending on your specific industry, you may also speak directly to your customers. So training your staff to become energy advisors with different levels of technical knowledge can be a great way to engage your customers in topics like energy efficiency improvements, behaviours, and how to contribute to moving the world towards net zero. A good energy advisor provides advice that's relevant and tailored to the customer that they're engaging with. We'll talk more about how to share energy advice with householders on the next slide. So if you have customers, then you might want to engage them in energy efficiency advice, as we said. So such as how to decarbonise their homes, or even simple behaviour change advice to help with their energy bills. To give you an example, at Energy Saving Trust, we have several advice teams that do this too. And one way that we measure the impact of those conversations is through Net Promoter Score, or NPS. NPS is a metric used to measure customer loyalty and satisfaction by asking how likely they are to recommend your product or service to others. The NPS score ranges from -100 to +100, and Energy Saving Trust's average score across our advice teams this year is 67, which is considered excellent. We're proud of our teams and their approach to delivering effective advice. So how do we achieve this? Well, a big part of that is through how we give advice. Before we give advice, we need to know our customers. Finding out someone's motivation starts with good conversations. An unstructured conversation makes it difficult for you to demonstrate your knowledge. So here on the slide, we have an example of a well-structured conversation. So starting off with greetings and introduction and explaining how the conversation will proceed. The householder or whoever you're speaking to may want advice straight away, but you need to know about their home and their circumstances first so that you can give the most appropriate and tailored advice. And an important thing to do is let the customer know this so that they don't get frustrated when you don't give advice straight away. The second step is to ask questions to understand the house, the occupants, their behaviours, future plans, motivations, and so on. If you already have to ask some questions, listen for answers that give you clues to the householder's motivations. Once you have enough information, it's then time to provide the most appropriate advice. So it's important to describe the benefits of that advice and tailor these to their motivations and needs, as this will encourage more engagement in the advice. Then ask the customer if they have any questions, just to make sure that they've understood. You could even ask them if they think they might consider any of the advice that you've given. This puts ownership on them and helps them to commit to changing their behaviours and considering home improvements. After answering their questions, then summarise the advice given, the next steps, and where the customer can go to for further information. And finally, close the conversation by including an invitation to speak again. Sticking to this general structure will allow you to give the best advice for each householder in a logical way that they can process easily. Remember, not all customers are the same, so not all of your conversations should be the same. They should follow this general structure, but what advice you give should depend on what that particular customer needs. So I'm now going to hand you over to my colleague Laura, who's going to talk about some of the advice areas.
Hi, thanks Lucy. So my name is Laura and I work at Energy Saving Trust as a Business Development Manager. And I'd just like to talk a bit about sharing energy advice online through effective content marketing. But for effective content marketing, what do we want to achieve? We want to showcase our expertise, share insights, and provide useful information that benefits our customers, and at the same time, drives up our SEO rankings and web traffic through meaningful messages. But What is it that customers want to know, and how can we present that information in a way that makes it most likely for them to read and engage with what we are saying? Perhaps we can take a few clues from the most popular and engaging content on our website. EnergySavingTrust.org.uk attracted 2.95 million visitors last year as a trusted and impartial source of energy saving advice. One of this year's most popular pages, and the one with the highest engagement rate, was our top 5 energy consuming home appliances. This was a light touch and accessible and easy to understand short list of appliances that for most of us make up the bulk of our emissions and our energy bills. This article covered wet appliances, cold appliances, electronics, lighting, and cooking. The messages shared were short and backed up with savings data that reflected the latest energy prices. Light touch, quick tips such as these can provide achievable ideas that empower customers to adapt and reduce their carbon footprint. If we move on to the next slide. Thank you. So to meet net zero, the UK government anticipates we'll need at least 600,000 installs of new heat pumps each year. Campaigns and government incentives, coupled with increased environmental awareness, means audiences are searching for information on these new heating systems. And this leads us to one of the most popular pages on the EST Energy Saving Trust website, the Air Source Heat Pump Guidance. So as we can clearly visualize from our latest graphic, which is actually taken from our InFact figures and considers today's energy prices, heating and hot water are actually the biggest users of energy in a typical home and contribute the most to our household energy bills. Looking at it like this, we can clearly see that our heating is the first place to turn to when looking to improve our home efficiency. Exploring the option of low or no carbon heating, like heat pumps, is therefore a key step to decarbonising our homes. So on this page, we can see a little bit of information about what is an air source heat pump. And the page also answers questions that many customers may have, such as where can I install it? How noisy is it? And of course, how much is it going to cost me? And what will I save? Again, we apply the most accurate savings data to provide advice that people can trust. There is then also a link to a much more detailed guide on heat pumps for those wanting to understand in more depth exactly how this technology works. By offering readers the option, we don't overwhelm them with information. However, we leave it all available, allowing them to make informed decisions to reduce their carbon footprint and improve their home. So if we move on to the next slide. So since April this year, our solar energy savings calculator has consistently been our most popular page. This is just one example of how we are harnessing digital tools to tailor our advice. So in this instance, you can simply type in your postcode and answer a few simple questions about your home to find tailored savings advice if you were to install solar panels that are applicable to your home. The power of digital tools to personalize the information you are sharing can create a much higher level of engagement. Just by inputting your data when answering the questions has us investing and interacting with the data much more than by simply reading. However, you can still create meaningful campaigns without such tools. Research has shown that customer education increases customers' environmental concerns and influences their attitudes towards green products. So messages that are easy to understand and gently raise our awareness about and knowledge about the climate emergency will support your company's business development and your relationship with clients. We do know what happens when this goes wrong though, and data of poor quality and information shared is disproven. That's why using the most accurate and up-to-date data that takes numerous variables into account or comes from a trustworthy source that does this is vital. At Energy Saving Trust, we can help you with this supporting data for your campaigns. That would cover those costs and energy savings that I mentioned earlier. It would also cover statistics and information about certain energy savings appliances. We can also offer energy advice training that goes into much greater depth than what as Lucy was discussing earlier. And we can also offer staff training. Even if your staff don't directly talk to customers on a one-to-one basis, for effective communication, organizations do need to practice what they preach. There's no good telling your customers to save energy if you're doing nothing to tackle your own emissions. And so every collaborator really does need to be aligned on this sustainability journey together. Communicating with our customers about where we are in our net zero or journey or our sustainability journey is becoming increasingly important. And so in some cases, it's actually a requirement in the procurement process for supplying certain large organizations. So we'll be covering a little bit more about what is involved in this net zero journey in our following webinar, which Jess will be talking about in a moment. And I'll now hand back to Jess.
Brilliant. Thanks, Laura. So as Laura mentioned, we have a series of webinars. So our next webinar is all about how you can get started on your organisation's journey. And this will take place, so how you can get started on your organisation's net zero journey. And that'll take place on the 26th of September at 10:30 a.m. A bit of context to that. So the UK is missing its targets for greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So we need to act fast to avoid the disastrous impacts of climate change. Businesses are at the forefront of this action, but need to support to develop sensible net zero plans which help the planet and in turn help the business. We're also seeing more and more businesses looking to develop a meaningful plan to keep customers. So in this next webinar, we will cover regulations which may require you to develop a strategy and help you to understand if these are relevant to your business. We'll use case studies and we will show how to develop a plan on how this can help your business thrive whilst minimising its environmental impact. And as I said, so this is a series of webinars, and during this series, we will also cover things like the price of carbon, housing stock property, and energy data to inform your retrofit strategies. So thanks for listening to this webinar. As I mentioned at the start, we'll now put up a series of polls on the screen for you to answer. So I'll just wait for Nora to pop them up. Just a reminder that these polls will be anonymous and nobody can see in this webinar can see your answer. Each poll will be launched separately and we'll give you a bit of time to answer the poll before moving on to the next one. So thanks, Nora. This is our first poll. Okay, thanks so much for that, Nora. So we're just coming onto the Q&A section now of our webinar. I'm just looking at the questions. It's empty at the moment, so please feel free to start posting any questions that you have. We have had some pre-submitted questions, so I'm going to ask them to the panel now. So if I ask Lucy and Laura to pop back on screen, and if Nora can lose the presentation and we can see everybody quite clearly. Okay, so our first pre-submitted questions. So there's two questions that I'm going to ask Lucy together, if that's okay. So Lucy, so different types of engagement strategies addressing the array of co-benefits. How can we apply for funding to help? Oh, sorry, no, apologies. I'll just, how to convert interest into action when addressing homeowners at residents association talks. Sorry,
Okay.
does that make sense, Lucy?
Yes, yeah, I think so. Yeah, it sounds like it's mostly about kind of engaging different audiences and explaining benefits, and hopefully I give a little bit of an introduction to that in the presentation. But to go into a little bit more detail, what I would really say is it's about kind of really knowing your customers or your householders or whoever it is you're engaging with, really kind of understanding them through good questioning, but really listening to those answers, but listening out for hooks as well, especially those who maybe are sort of have a casual interest in the topic, or maybe don't have as much knowledge, and kind of really focusing on explaining the benefits and tailoring them to different situations. So for example, if someone's complaining about drafts, cold spots, cold rooms, focusing that advice around, this will make you feel cozy and warmer and more comfortable. Whereas, someone might be talking about kind of mold in their property, so they might be talking about sort of reducing condensation risk, talking about house value increases, if that's their kind of motivation, improve their quality for vulnerable occupants as well, or families with young children and things like that. So it's really kind of taking what that customer is motivated by and what their situation is, and you might be applying similar advice in each conversation, but the way you're delivering it and the way you're tailoring it is different. And another thing is just, not kind of overloading someone with too much advice as well. So focusing it on what they're motivated by, and kind of keeping it to a minimum, kind of just bearing in mind this sort of, we've all got short attention spans, so not throwing it all in, but yeah, just sort of focusing on what's going to benefit them the most. Hopefully that's answered both those questions, I think.
Thanks, Lucy. And then we have a question about how can we apply for funding to help households. I'm going to ask that to Laura, please.
Hi, thanks, Jess. Yeah, so I think this is obviously going to depend on the organisation as to which funding they might apply for and what they might be eligible for. Perhaps one example of funding that's available is Ofgem redress. Energy Saving Trust was actually appointed by Ofgem to distribute payments from energy companies that may have breached some of the Ofgem rules. And registered charities, community interest companies, cooperative societies and community benefit societies can actually apply for those funds to deliver energy related projects that meet the scheme's priorities and that benefit people in England, Scotland and Wales. Hope that helps.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Laura. So the next question I'm going to ask to you, Lucy. So help with dealing with A-listed buildings and sites, and how to deal with LBC, planning permission and building warrants.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think just for context, I think LBC is possibly listed building consent. So yeah, lots of different kind of rules on different types of properties, especially older traditional properties. A-listed buildings have sort of particular case-by-case challenges, so it's important to work with the local planning office as early in the project as you can. So some examples of challenges are, not being able to change the outside of the building, even some internal rooms sometimes, and working with more traditional materials like lime-based plasters, so that can kind of cause their challenges. But it can be done. Sites of historical interest have been insulating, improving their heating by putting in heat pumps, and some are even powered by solar panels as well. So it can be done, but yeah, it's just kind of looking into it in a little bit more depth.
Brilliant, thank you, Lucy. I think I've got a final pre-submitted question for yourself, Laura, and then we have got some questions coming through on the question section now as well. So, Laura, we've got a question about someone who's keen to develop relevant knowledge, updates, and policy.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, because obviously if you're trying to show expertise, you do need to keep yourself as up to date as possible. Probably my first piece of advice would be to follow the Energy Saving Trust website quite closely, as we really share a wealth of information on there. Most of the, I mean, almost all of the information considers the most up-to-date energy prices, or it's appropriately dated to make sure that the information is as accurate as it can be. We also share news or statements on some of the policy updates. If you want to also receive other updates on when new content is added or any important news, I would recommend following the social media channels. If you want to do this in a more like systematic and easy to use way, you can then, we also have other products such as InFact, which I showed a bit of data from earlier, where you would receive that an updated set of data that's so easy to use in your campaigns and is always kept up to date, and that is updated every single time the energy prices change.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Laura. So I've got a couple of chat questions. So the first one is, for improved staff engagement and awareness, carbon literacy training is invaluable. Oh, actually, so this is someone just promoting that they'll soon be offering a free shareable carbon literacy course, and it'd be great to have this feature on Energy Saving Trust information for SMEs. So yeah, so thank you for that. And the next question is, when talking to homeowners, are organisations guilty of overcomplicating the net zero journey, when as consumers we are now more than ever aware of our energy costs? Have you got any comments on that, either Laura or Lucy?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was just reading the question myself as well. So yeah, so the question is, are organisations guilty of complicating that journey? And yeah, definitely we are more aware of our energy costs at the moment, and I think some of that comes back to really breaking that journey down for your consumers and your householders. So sort of going back to really understanding what your customers need, whoever they are, what kind of audience they are, is just yeah, so similar to what I was saying earlier, I think, but I'm not sure if that quite answers the first part of the question. But yeah, I think it is just I don't know if we can comment on whether our organisations are guilty of complicating that journey, but I think understanding what your customers need in order to then plan that out for them potentially will help you avoid complicating it. I don't know if that's a bit of a vague answer to that, but yeah, if anyone wants to elaborate, happy to chat.
Thanks, Lucy. Another one for you about showers. How can they play a role in reducing our energy use?
Yeah, great question. There's a few things you can do with showers. So you know, there's kind of two parts to shower use. So showers using energy to heat the water, and also the water itself. So I think sometimes we forget that water is a resource that we're using, and sometimes we're billed for that in certain parts of the UK as well. So showers can be one of many ways to reduce energy use and water use in the home. So one way is to have, you know, a kind of more efficient shower or efficient low flow shower heads, so that they reduce the amount of water that's coming through, but often they're kind of designed so that you still feel like you're getting a nice sort of powerful shower. So that can be one way. And another way is just the behaviour around it, so how long we're spending in the shower. So we typically say around about 4 minutes is quite a good length of time in the shower, or a good max. I know some people are quicker than that. But yeah, kind of just be mindful of how long we're spending in the shower, especially this is a great one to get kids involved with as well. Turn it into a game, almost a challenge to put on your favorite song that's no more than 4 minutes and see if you can get out quickly. That's quite a common thing to do as well. So hopefully that answers that question. Thanks,
Lucy. That's what I try to do with my teenager, but yeah, just not working yet, but we'll get there. I noticed there's no more questions in the question section of the WebEx, and we've answered all our pre-submitted questions. So we've got another one pop through now, actually. Thank you. So another showers question. Are some showers better than others? Lucy again.
Well, that's an interesting question. I suppose it kind of depends on your setup, I think, as well. So I suppose maybe the question's getting at whether you should have an electric shower or a shower powered by your heating systems, maybe a gas powered main shower. Yeah, I think it really depends. So electricity costs more typically than the likes of gas, for example, but sometimes they're more efficient in terms of they heat up the water quicker. So it kind of depends on what your view of efficiency is. Sometimes they use less water as well. So electric showers, for example, you wouldn't fit with a low flow shower head, but they are kind of designed in a way that they do the same thing, and they often have more different controls. Some have eco controls that you can set so that they're maybe not as intense on the energy, but that doesn't mean you can spend half an hour in the electric shower, because your electricity bills will go up as well. So you need to kind of get that balance and think about what's best for you.
Thanks very much, Lucy. No more questions popping through now, and all of our pre-submitted questions we've answered. So I think it just remains for me to wrap it up. Say thank you so much to Laura and Lucy for a very insightful webinar. Thank you to Nicole for her interpretation. And yeah, plug in to the next webinar. It'll be advertised in the usual places, and then have a great day. Oh, hang on, one more thing. There is a just to say that the webinar recording and presentation slides will be shared with you after the event. Thanks, Nora, for reminding me about that. So yeah, thanks very much, guys. We're going to close the webinar now, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Super, thank you.